keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome into another episode of Coffee Break. And just like I did yesterday, I'm going to start the show by pointing out a really good cause that we have going on here in the Denver area. It is the KYGO Country Cares for St. Jude Children's Radiothon. You, just like I did, can become a partner in hope for just $19 a month. There's a toll-free number on the screen right there, or you can text KYGO to 626262. Our sister station KYGO does a fantastic job and does such great work with St. Jude Children's Hospital, who, in my opinion, is bar none one of the best organizations that we have in the country, and I'm a huge fan of the work they do. So head to kygo.com for more information, and hopefully you too can help us make a difference. As far as the sports world goes, the Broncos are on a bye week, but the Avs and the Nuggets are rolling. We're getting close to finding out who the Buffs are going to play in their bowl matchup. And to break it all down with me, I have the man who needs no introduction, but I usually give him one, and that is James Merilatt. James, how are you?
I'm good, Richie. I'm good. I think we know it might be it's the Alamo Bowl, Arizona State.
Yep.
Depending on how things go.
Well, I thought the initial projection was BYU.
Because I saw today it was either BYU okay. So it's either BYU or Iowa State.
Yep.
And it's either Arizona State or Colorado.
Yep.
Like I think that's how it
depending
goes.
on how the championship game goes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
This is like that weird ANSI period in college football where it's like we finish the regular season. You have to wait a little bit for conference championship weekend, and then you got to like wait a little bit more for the playoff. And it's just like, I think we can streamline this a little bit. Let's just push it forward. Let's play the games. I'm really ready to dive into the expanded college football playoff and see how it all shakes out, because I didn't mind the 4-team playoff, but I do think that this adds a lot more drama and excitement and intrigue about the way the bracket can go.
Way more. I do think it makes the bowl games, though, even more meaningless.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I mean, the fact that the Buffs are going to a bowl, great.
Yep,
but
and it's so funny you say that, because I had this conversation with Jake yesterday, and I didn't have it slated up for today, but I'll just cue it up here with you because you're a Buffs guy. I titled the segment "Remember the Alamo," and my stance on it is that I am not going to remember the Alamo in this case. I think 5-10 years from now, I'm not going to care, and a lot of people are going to kind of be like, "Oh yeah," when we talk about the Buffs playing in an Alamo Bowl against BYU or Arizona State or whoever, Iowa State, when they had the paved platform that they had in front of them, and it was a fortuitous position for them to be in. It's hard to look at a 9-10 win season and be like, man, that was a disappointment. But I actually do kind of feel that way, because I think that when Coach Prime got here and things started out hot the way they did last year, and then they fell off the rails pretty egregiously in some regards, it was like, hey, well, that happened and they still improved their win total by 3 wins. You know, they went from a 1-win team to a 4-win team.
Right.
And so, okay, but now the next year, now all those things that we kind of were hoping would happen right away, in terms of bowl game, competing for the college football playoff, conference championship, all that, those are in play. And they were. And they all the things they needed to do, the Buffs, from year 1 to year 2 under Coach Prime, they freaking did it. They solidified the trenches on the offensive and defensive side. They maximized their skill positions on the outside. They found a way to run the ball better despite some departures. And all they had to do was be in that fortuitous but dangerous position of not beating yourself. They were statistically and on paper better than all the teams in front of them, and you just can't stumble and fall into the trap. And they did. Devin Neal's probably still scoring touchdowns at Arrowhead.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get it. It's disappointing because right now we should be having a different conversation. We should be talking today about how are they going to match up with Arizona State in the Big 12 title game. I believe that's what it would have been if they'd have made it, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, that's a bummer. And then if they'd have won that game, then they're in the playoff, and we're getting excited for that. But I think if you fast forward 3 months from now, we'll look back and go, man, that was a great year. They won 10 games, assuming they win the Alamo Bowl. They had a Heisman Trophy winner. Where they came from 2 years ago, unbelievable. And I don't think this team was going to win the national title. So that being the case, the end result is going to be the same as it is now. Would it have been more fun to be in the Big 12 title game?
I don't know about that, James.
Would it have been more fun to be in the playoff? Yes, it's the same result.
No, I'll agree with you that I don't think that this team, if they were to make it into the college football playoff, was a legitimate like true contender to win the national championship, because when you start influxing the talent in the Big Ten and the SEC and all of that, like those are big boys too. And I think that they beat up on some lesser Big 12 competition for some of those games, but you can only play who's in front of you. And you can say the end result would be the same, but I don't think it would, because what you're saying is going to the dance and getting rejected is the same as not being allowed to go to the dance at all. Like,
it's the same.
You pulled up to the auditorium and the doors were locked to the gym. You couldn't go in. You couldn't have some punch. You couldn't even try to hit on a girl. You weren't even allowed.
Same end result. You're going home alone. It's the same result.
But at least you got to say you were at the dance.
Oh, big whoop. That's a fun story.
That is a big whoop.
No.
That is a big whoop, because the only guy that's more lame than getting rejected at the dance is the guy that didn't even get a date to the dance.
It's the same end result. So
it's not. It's not. As someone who lived both of those scenarios, it doesn't feel the same.
If they'd have gone to Happy Valley and lost to Penn State by 40, that would have been a much better season.
Yeah.
No.
Yes, absolutely, James.
No.
Because you know what? We would have been talking this whole time about how to go up against James Franklin, who I think is an epic late season choke artist. And I actually would have been excited about that matchup, because I think they could have beat him.
I just think, it's not as though they blew their chance to win the national title. It would have been more fun to be in the conversation, and it would have made the last 3 or 4 weeks more interesting. But a year from now, we'll look back, it's the same result.
But also, here's what I also think factors into it is just like, we use the euphemism sometimes of you can't choose when you suck, right? When the Broncos had the 5th overall pick and need of a quarterback, and Josh Allen was on the board, and they chose Bradley Chubb, a lot of the reaction was you had a chance to draft a guy who was right in your backyard, who now is one of the most electric, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and you didn't. And you don't know when you're going to be back in a position to select a guy like that. Now they have Bo Nix, who was the 6th quarterback taken off the board and is outpacing those projections. But just like you can't choose when you suck, you can't choose or know ahead of time when the chips are going to fall your way. They had the runway lights on, like we talked about earlier this week.
The runway lights to what? Finishing 12th?
To being in a conference championship and making a chance to go to the college football playoff.
I agree, James, that would have been more fun, but it's the same end result.
But what I'm saying is you had that because you had Shador, you had Travis Hunter, 2 guys you're not going to have going forward, and you don't know if everything's going to fall into place the same way it did. Juju Lewis is 16 years old right now. He'll be 17 next year if they even choose to start him.
I'm just looking at it this way. And yes, it would have been more fun the last 2 or 3 weeks, and the next 2 or 3 weeks, there would have been more conversation and all the rest of that. But if they go win the Alamo Bowl versus if they go lose in Happy Valley 42-7, in one scenario, they finish in the final rankings 12th, and in the other scenario, they finish 14th. What's the difference?
James, it's how you got there. Context matters. Context matters. If you finish 12th.
Listen, they're not the Indianapolis Colts. They're not raising the number 12 overall banner at Folsom. It's the same end result.
No, James, I disagree. I disagree. I think that it's disingenuous to say that the end result would be the same as fumbling against a lesser team and ruining your chance at postseason contention when it was right there and being like, well, I think that's a loser's mentality. That's like, well, they weren't going to make it anyway, so who cares if they didn't even get to try?
I'm just saying, and the end result is going to be roughly the same. And 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, we're going to look back on the season very similar.
I'm not going to remember the Alamo, and neither are you. So don't even go there.
I'm not, but I sure as hell would remember losing 42-7 to Penn State.
One thing I will remember, I won't remember the Alamo. One thing I will remember a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, is how awful Alexander Georgiev is between the pipes for the Avs.
He's a mess.
It is. And listen, I feel like I've as a part of the roller coaster, I feel like I've been high on him. I've been low on him. And I remember when they signed him thinking, hey, the Avs might have plucked a guy from behind Igor Shesterkin, who is a good, capable backup goalie who did well in spots for New York, and he just was never going to get in front of one of the best goalies in the league.
Yeah.
No, that he's wilted. The sun has shone on him now more, and he has wilted under that. And it's gotten to a point where I legitimately had talked myself into a mathematical formula of the Avs having a better shot at winning the cup with Justus Annunen. Because I was like, every single game that he started when Georgie was getting pulled 5 times in the first 20 games of the season, it was like, okay, Justus Annunen, he's good. He's good for 25 saves a night. And if you can play good enough defense to limit those saves in front of him, then he can win you games. They can win games 3-2, not 6-4. And then they traded Eustace. Bednar has had a lot of faith in Georgie, more faith than I would have, which is why he's standing on the sidelines there with his perfect hair, and I'm sitting here next to you wearing a hat. But we just saw Georgie get pulled after 4 first period goals, and Scott Wedgwood, who literally probably doesn't even have a temporary housing here yet. He just got here, and he goes 22 for 22 and helps the Avs complete a 4-goal deficit comeback to win 5-4. I'm at this point, and this is, again, as a part of the roller coaster, changing for my opinion of once they got rid of Eustace, it was like, hey, if the Avs are going to win another Stanley Cup or contend for one, it's going to be on the back of Alexander Georgiev, and he's just going to have to figure it out. I am now very quickly rescinding that statement. I was wrong. My bad. I don't think Georgie should be the starting goalie from today forward. Put Scott Wedgwood out there for all I care.
Well, it's hard to argue it considering what just happened in Buffalo. And it's amazing. They're barely more than a quarter of the way through the season. And how many times just on this show, you and I have already had this conversation. It's remarkable. I think we had it after the opener, right? Like, so here we are again. And it's because Georgie keeps one-upping himself in terms of bad performances. 4 goals on 8 shots in like 12 minutes. Like it was remarkable. And then the other guy comes in and pitches a shutout. It's not like, oh, Buffalo was just on fire that day. Like if Wedgwood had come in and he gave up 2 or 3 goals on 22 shots, it just would have been like, wasn't their night.
Yep.
Right. But
I would have been like, you know what? Wedgie was put in a bad place.
It's just to be like but the distinct difference is what you look at and go, one guy was awful and the other guy was really good.
And for the record, Scott Wedgwood's a career backup goaltender. It's not like
they're not winning with Scott Wedgwood, though.
They're not winning with Georgie, and I think they got a better chance of winning with Wedgwood than with Georgie.
That's why you need to send Mikko to New York for Igor Shesterkin.
You are correct, and that was going to be something that I was going to lay out. I am aware that 100-point scorers in the NHL don't grow on trees. And Mikko is one of the top 10, maybe even close to fringe top 5 offensive players in hockey right now. It's not really debatable. And he's going to command, his floor is probably still more than what Nathan MacKinnon is going to get paid on the open market. And I think he could get his $50 million if you listen to what, insiders and people who are kind of tied into that kind of thing are saying. The Avs are not going to pay him that. They've drawn a pretty hard line that they're not going to pay him more than Nathan MacKinnon. And on a certain level, I understand it. And in a hard cap sport, as strict as hockey is, it's not as simple as you can be in other sports of like, hey, we're going to pay Mikko 13, but we're going to go back and we're going to amend McKinnon's contract. They don't have the money. There's no space.
This whole MacKinnon has to be the highest paid guy thing. That's balderdash.
Well,
he signed his contract a couple years ago. The market changes. It's whoever
I got it. I understand it from their perspective.
That's silly. If that's what they're doing, they're incompetent.
James, I think it is what they're doing. I think they've basically said it.
Well, if I was Mikko's group, I'd tell him pound sand too.
Which is what I think is going to happen because Mikko's camp has already kind of tamping down the discussions. They're not going to do it. And you've brought up the Dikembe Mutombo situation plenty of times. And that is what I think is going to happen.
Me too.
It's wishing in one hand and you know what in the other. If you're just going to say, hey, we'll figure it out after the year. And then he walks and he's playing for the Calgary Flames like we saw Kadri do for all the money in the world.
I believe Shesterkin's a free agent
after this. Yes.
But his money is going to be less, believe it or not.
It'll probably be 9.
Which
comparatively, because goalies, it's different. It's different
much more in
by position,
their budget.
So if
just
you're telling me that even if they pay, and here's what's even more convincing of it, even if they pay Mikko all of King Midas's silver, they still can't stop a goal,
right?
And it's going to be the same thing. So if you're telling me my 2 options are, we keep Mikko and his 100-point pace production, and you've got MacKinnon, Makar, Mikko, Lecky, all that. And you and I between the pipes, or MacKinnon, Makar, Lecky, and Igor Shesterkin, or another top tier goaltender, because you're not going to deal Mikko for someone who's not a top tier. This isn't like the path that Will Peterson I know is advocating for. Of like, I'm not looking for great, I'm looking for average or bet a slightly above average. You're not going to do something like that for Mikko. And Will had a piece at denversports.com laying out other guys, Ross Colton,
Yeah.
other guys you could deal for just like a little bit better. I'm not interested in a little bit better.
We're going to have the same conversation.
Yep. We're going to be like, you should have just thrown your chips in the center of the table.
A little bit better is
So
Darcy Kemper.
I want the best that's available. I think this is a unique opportunity with Shesterkin, who New York doesn't want to let go of, but he's been allegedly resistant or kind of wishy-washy on signing a new deal with them the same way Mikko has been with the Avs. I think this is a weird, unique opportunity. And yes, 100-point goal scorer or 100-point scorers don't grow on trees, but and it is undeniable that the thing that's holding the Avs back from contending for another cup is their goaltending drama, which they haven't solved since Patrick Waugh stopped playing.
Well, and I've said it a bunch of times. This team isn't built to win 2-1. I get it. They're built to win 4-3, 5-4. Problem is, Georgiev can't keep it at 3 or keep it at 4.
No, and
that's the problem.
And you would be with Shesterkin, you would be built to win games 3-2, 2-0.
And they still would have enough firepower to get 2, 3, 4 goals a night. And the other thing of it is, and look, I'm not saying this to diminish Mikko. I think he's a great player.
I think amazing.
I think if Mikko goes to New York and he's the number one guy, it's not the same as being here and playing beside Nathan McKinnon.
I agree.
It's just not. He won't be the same player.
I agree. And so
good luck.
I'm all for it because listen, we need to take a serious look in the mirror with the Avs and the Nuggets, who we're going to get to in a second, and say, hey, it's hard to win a championship. And the Avs have had an embarrassment of riches on their top two lines. Even without Landeskog playing for the last couple of years, they've had an embarrassment of riches that they have found a way to keep and maintain. And they won a cup with it, with Darcy Kemper and Frankie, who are the worst championship goaltending by save percentage in NHL history. Georgie right now is 48th in save percentage. And to steal another Will Petersonism, last time I checked, James, there's only 32 teams in hockey. So you got a guy who's a whole third outside of the top 32. And you can't do it. You can't do it. And if the Avs are serious about considering themselves a championship contending organization, it is malpractice if you can bring in a guy like Shesterkin or another top flight goaltender, and all it's going to cost you is Mikko Rantanen when you still have McKinnon, Makar, Leckie, and the rest of your lines intact. It's malpractice not to do it.
Well, it's time to break the formula, right? They did win a cup, but it's a little bit like the Broncos insisting they could win every year with a great defense.
And
it's an aberration.
You struck lightning, no pun intended, because you beat the Lightning. You struck lightning in a bottle that cup year. They were an offensive force unlike anything I've ever seen, and we may not see an Avs offensive team like that ever again. It felt like watching Normandy Beach when the Avs were in the offensive zone, and that opposing defense and goaltender were there was nothing they could do.
But before that and after that, they haven't come close.
Nope.
It's not like they've lost in the finals.
You
they
can't
haven't been close.
You're not going to strike lightning twice. That's my point.
You're not.
It's time to spin the board around.
Totally agree.
Okay, so we're in agreement there, because I think they're going to do it? No. And I think it's going to cost them. But I think it's egregious if that's really what it comes down to. And you're doing almost, a star player for star player swap, Mikko for a star goaltender, and probably some extras on both sides. It gets complicated. You have to do it.
Well, if they keep Mikko and don't trade him at the deadline, one of two things has to happen: win the cup, or you re-sign him. If you don't win the cup and he walks for nothing, it's malpractice and people should be fired.
And again, I think the goaltender situation gives you a little bit of added insurance if some of your offensive firepower, Gabe Landeskog, never comes back, which I also believe is going to happen, and Val Nichushkin gets popped again for something, because we never know, and we knock on whatever surface we need to do that doesn't happen, but it very well could.
No doubt.
I'll tell you what, I wouldn't feel great, but I'd feel a smidge better about both of those two worst case scenarios happening if they had better faith in their goaltender. And you saw it after the game that Wedgwood came in when he went 22 for 22. They gave him the big silly hat, and it just I feel like you could see it in the clip of the looks on their faces, the excitement, the energy that they had, because they felt like they could trust that guy in that moment, and he did it. They don't have that with Georgie.
Well, it's exhausting as a team to go out and know you have to score 4 goals to have a chance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because you're tissue paper.
Yeah. So, no, I'm in agreement. I don't think they're going to do it. I think they should do it. I think it's a bold move. And I think if they want to be a serious cup contender, that's the kind of move they need to make.
Well, the Nuggets are in a similar boat when it comes to the fear of wasting a core and a star player's prime. And we've seen Charles Barkley and other national analysts in the last week or so kind of speculate that about the Nuggets and Nikola Jokic. And I think this one's a little different, though, because with the Avs, their star players and their core, everyone's doing basically what they're supposed to do. McKinnon and McCarr are among the top in the NHL in points. Their production on their top two lines is great, and their depth, by and large, has not been egregious. It's literally just been the goaltending. That's the only dart you need to throw. With the Nuggets, it's kind of more murky because they were limited in what they could do, and some people weren't thrilled with the offseason moves that the Nuggets made this past offseason, Jettison and Renning Jackson, bringing in Russell Westbrook, who for a team that needs more volume and better conversion percentage on three-point shooting, brought in the worst volume three-point shooter in NBA history, and Dario Saric, who we've had conversations about whether or not he forgot how to play basketball since he's been here, and he's been a DNP for so many games.
Yep.
But with the Nuggets, I don't think it's fair to pin where the Nuggets are at on the bench, because the narrative, fairly so, has been you need to survive the non-Jokic minutes. You can't be plus 25, plus 30 when Jokic is on the court and then immediately revert to a plus, minus 19, minus 25 when he's off, because you can't win games that way and you're going to exhaust him because he's playing 40 minutes a night. I think that the Nuggets' problem is they've got max contract players who are not living up to their end of the bargain. I don't think Jamal Murray, who just got handed a $200 million contract extension, is going to make $100 million over the next couple of years, is giving you offensively the production and the consistency that you need there. Now, we saw in their last game that he was able to contribute in other ways. He dished 7 or 8 assists. He played some hustle defense, and Christian Brown has stepped into a role as a starter. And while I think teams have kind of figured out some motion and movements that can throw Christian Brown out of his game, but there's no doubt his shot making ability has been greater than KCP's.
Yep.
And his defensive ability has not been, because that was something that KCP was pretty well known for, is his perimeter defense and kind of his ability to stay lanky there in the passing lanes. Christian Brown might not be at that level yet, but it's not a dramatic fall off. But Michael Porter Jr. is still a little bit of a roller coaster despite expanding his bag a little bit. And Jamal Murray, I just don't think you're getting enough out of him.
Well, look, I think it definitely comes down to two things. One, I think it's the core four. That's where they put all their money. Those guys have to live up to their contracts, and it's coaching. Because if you look at everything else, I do think Christian Brown's been just as good as KCP. I think Peyton Watson coming off the bench has been fine. I think Russell Westbrook he's kind of playing the Bruce Brown role.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's been fine. They haven't do they have a Jeff Green? Probably not, because they don't really have a big that you really trust coming off the bench. But if your biggest problem is how do we replace Jeff Green?
Right.
It's not incompetence by the front office. The issue is the step back that Jamal Murray has taken.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Gordon has been hurt. That's nobody's fault, but that's a problem. Michael Porter Jr. is probably playing better than he did during their championship year. So it's Jamal Murray just taking a nosedive, appearing to be a guy who is completely satisfied with one championship, a couple of big contracts, and he's good just being that guy. And people like to say I pick on Michael Malone, but I think that he sets the tone.
You do pick on Michael Malone.
I think this is a team that clearly has established we don't care about the regular season. Jokic takes 12 days off when his wife has a baby. Michael Malone stays home to go to his kid's volleyball game. Like, okay, well, that's why you're in the position you're in.
Right. And
so I think it's those three things.
If you're going to put me on the stand and make me choose a side about care about the regular season or don't, I'm going to choose care about the regular season.
Me too.
Absolutely. But I actually think that the issues that we're talking about, the core issues of Jamal Murray taking a little bit of a step back and some of the lack of interest that it seems, or motivation, or just kind of
those things go hand in hand, though.
His Moody Murray kind of, persona that he likes to take on to try to get under people's skin. That bothers me. Michael Porter Jr., who I want to give credit for. I think he has expanded his bag a little bit from being I'm going to cherry pick the 3-point line and either brick it or the ball's not coming to me.
He's better than he was 2 years ago.
Yeah, he is. And so I want to give him credit there, but it's still, the expectation is that it needs to be that way all the time. And if other players, even max players, are not up to their bar, he needs to be able to elevate that, because he's still a max player. And it's more on Jamal for me than it is MPJ and some of the bench unit, because I think Russell Westbrook, I think the Nuggets are getting more than what they paid for from that, despite some moments that he's had.
So the problems are, number one, Jamal Murray. He's regressed in 2 years.
Yep.
Number two, the Aaron Gordon injury, not anybody's fault.
No.
And number three,
AG can do no wrong. Aaron Gordon is my Russell Wilson for you. That is, Aaron Gordon will never do wrong in my eyes. That is my favorite Nugget of all time.
And number three is the fact that they just seem to have their priorities out of whack. And I think number three is part of number one's problem. I do. I think he's worried about all the things that come with being Jamal Murray and thinking he's a star than just going out and playing basketball.
You know what comes with being Jamal Murray? Nothing. Go play basketball. You're a 0-time All-Star. Okay?
But he's got an entourage around him like he's Kobe Bryant, and a bunch of people who tell him he's great when he's not. But
and I'll say this though, James, because I agree with you. By and large, overall, I definitely think that I think when he's on, he's great. When Jamal Murray is on offensively, it's special. It really is.
It is, but it's few and far between now.
I get it, and that's the problem.
Here's the thing, though. Bobby Knight, love him or hate him, he was 100% right about one thing. The best motivator is sitting your butt on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Malone, if all these people hanging around Jamal Murray, his dad and his cousins and all the shoe people and all the rest of it, don't want to give him the reality check, then Michael Malone, who loves the fact that he's old school, hard, you know what guy, and he's okay, then be that guy. Sit his butt on the bench. Why don't we see that? He's afraid of his star.
That doesn't help them.
He's afraid of him.
Because what happens when they do that and then it doesn't work? You think Jamal Murray responds to that? I know, I understand Bobby Knight's philosophy on it. I get that. I think it sends Jamal Murray into a different. He's up here.
Kissing his you know what hasn't helped. At some point, Jamal Murray needs somebody to tell him, "Hey, Jamal, you're not as good as you think you are, dude. You aren't."
I think it has to. I don't think it has to come from Malone. I think it has to come from Jokic. I think.
Okay, well, but he's not that guy.
He's not. But that's what I'm saying is I don't think Michael Malone doing these things is going to impact Jamal Murray.
At some point, the head coach has to be the boss. Yeah, and sometimes that's an uncomfortable conversation.
That's true.
And sometimes that's telling people things they don't want to hear. That time has come.
Well, I think that time may have come for the Nuggets. And I think in terms of telling people things that they may not want to hear, I think that may be the case with you and the Denver Broncos because
oh my goodness.
James, I think I can feel you resisting it. Like I've heard you on the air with all the different shows, and I can see the trend in the language and in the columns that you write at denversports.com. I think you're starting to run out of arrows in the quiver or bullets in the chamber to be resistant or negative about Bo Nix. Man.
No,
he is. See, and this is where you're going to think, you're like, no, I love Bo Nix. What are you talking about? I just needed to see two things. I got my checklist. 1, 2, 3. I know it. Go ahead.
Okay, listen, just because I don't put orange Kool-Aid in the drinking fountain,
it tastes good,
and start just chugging it on week one,
it tastes good,
doesn't mean I'm anti-Bo. We have been burned over and over and over and over again in this town. So just because I'm not the guy that's been married 17 times, goes on a first date and goes to Vegas and gets married an 18th time.
Yep.
Like, no, let's see if, there's some of those red flags. Let's see if, this, and this.
And you went looking for those red flags. You checked his phone and guess what? No weird text messages.
I know.
You have his location. It was not at the club. Okay.
I met his family. They're not,
Yep.
bat blank, whatever.
Yep. His sister loves you. It's all good. It's all good, man.
I get it. But there's one, and I've said this on the air all week, right? So my biggest red flags heading into the season and at draft time were, it makes me nervous when I hear he's a processor, he's a supercomputer, what was in his backpack. It was nothing about his abilities, right? It was nothing about that makes him special.
But all those things were true.
Fine. Yeah. But it wasn't like, he's got the best, like the Josh Allen, best arm. He's a great runner, whatever.
He's a freak.
We didn't hear anything about his physical abilities. That makes me nervous. Makes me think he's going to be a Wednesday whiteboard wizard. Mm-hmm. Had enough of those. Okay. So then we get into the season, and I'm just being a realist coming out of the Tampa game as an example, saying, listen, he played well, but he didn't make
being a realist, you're being a cynic.
He didn't make a single throw Jarrett Stidham couldn't make in that game. He didn't. Okay. So then as things go on, I said after the game against the Browns, the 93-yard touchdown to Marvin Mims is a play that most guys can't make.
Yep.
That was a special play.
Yep. So
You
I think
have
it's
to
the best throw a Broncos quarterback has made since Peyton Manning 2013.
You have to show me you can do something special before I'm just going to say you're special, because you repeatedly go out and do things that a bunch of other guys can do. Now he has shown me that. So there's one more hoop to jump through.
Here we go. Go ahead. It's going to be to beat a good team.
Correct.
Okay.
The teams they've beaten are a combined 29-67.
Mm-hmm.
They've played 5 good teams. They're 0-5. That's just the reality.
James.
The Seahawks playoff team lost. Chiefs playoff team lost.
But again, a lot of those games happened early in
Chargers,
the season
playoff
when they
team,
were
lost.
A lot of those games happened earlier in the
They
season.
beat the NFC South, the Raiders twice, the Jets, and the Browns.
James, they were an Alex Forsyth quick death away from beating the Chiefs on the road.
And they were a Greg Zuerlein field goal away from losing to the dog butt
That's
Jets.
the ugliest game of all time. That is.
So you're being the little league mom keeping the score.
No,
book.
that's not true. I'm
a single when the ball goes through.
Yeah,
little Johnny's.
Yeah. No, I'm not
legs.
I'm not being the little league mom. What I am being is
I am
being is the high school guidance counselor that's telling you, like, it's okay to love again. You're gonna get your heart broken. You're gonna get your heart broken, but it's okay to love again.
Go do it on Thursday night in LA against the Chargers.
I hate that Thursday night situation. They didn't have to do it. They just didn't have to do it.
Do it in week 18 with something on the line and the Chiefs coming in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you this.
That's the two chances he has to do it.
Here's why I'm not worried about it, James, because I think they're not. I think they're going to. In fact, and I don't know if I've had this conversation with you, but I've laid it out. I laid it out first with James Palmer in our Overreaction Tuesday segment. I think the Broncos have one loss left on their schedule the rest of the season. I think they're going to finish 11 and will they be 11-6?
Yeah. Who is that? It's the Chargers?
Yep. I think it's good. Before, I thought it was going to be a coin flip.
It's almost like a scheduled loss.
Yes. I thought it was going to be a coin flip between the Bengals and the Chargers. Now that they flexed into Thursday night on the road for a second time when they didn't have to, not going to get over it. I think that is probably an L that you kind of set yourself up for, but I think they're going to beat the Colts coming out of the bye. I think they are going to beat the Bengals, regardless of acknowledging that the Bengals might be in a shutdown situation, which is insane because Joe Burrow is having one of the best offensive seasons I've ever seen from a 4-win team. But even if they're not, even if they don't shut it down, I think they can beat that team straight up. I think they're going to beat the Chiefs in week 18, whether there's something on the line or not, because I think that the way they lost on the road is stuck in their craw. And I think the Chargers is your coin flip.
I think they're going to get to 10. I think if they don't get to 10, it'll be a huge disappointment. I think they could get to 11 because, like you say, there's some things that could play into their favor.
Historically speaking, they found a way to split with the Chargers. It would not surprise me if they did not.
But here's the thing. For me to say you got to do something special for me to say you're special is not being unfair.
It's for me to say, but again, you're good at this too. You're a wordsmith, and you say that in you say that deductively as if like that's what it gets reduced down to after a lot of boiling. But the evaporation process on the way down is not as simple as that. And it's much more inflammatory.
For me to say you have to beat a good team for me to believe you can beat a good team is not unfair. They have not beaten a good team.
I know, James, but again, can you not acknowledge that some of the losses against good teams that they had were Bo Nix's first, third, and fifth games? Like, they were still figuring it out.
And they had 10 yards of offense before their final drive in the second half against the Chiefs.
Do you think the Broncos team that we saw against Cleveland or against Vegas, their most recent games, beats that Seattle team?
Maybe.
Come on, James.
They couldn't stop Kenneth Walker III in the second half. That's not on Bo Nix.
He's one of the better running backs in the NFL.
Okay. I mean, they just let Jameis Winston throw for 497. Look, I want to see him beat a good team. But here's the other thing. I think it's important they do get to 11 wins because here's the best case scenario for the Broncos. Finish with the 5 seed, go down to Houston in the first round. You're beating the Texans.
I think so too.
Okay. So then you're just rooting for weird things to happen. Mm-hmm. There's a possibility their road is go win at Houston, go win at Pittsburgh, and you got the Chargers pulling upsets, and you host the AFC title game against the Chargers. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't shock me.
No.
It wouldn't shock me if this team went one and done in the playoffs. It wouldn't shock me if they went to the freaking Super Bowl.
I'll give you another one because I agree with you. I think that there are a handful of teams in the postseason, the non-wild card postseason format that I think the Broncos could beat if they were in there. I don't want to mess with Buffalo. I don't really want to do that.
That's what you need the Chargers to go win.
But I think you can compete. I think you can compete against the Chargers, and we'll see how the rematch looks in a couple of weeks. I think you can beat Houston. they're in that spot because the division leader's got to be a top 4 seed kind of thing. And I'm telling you, and I'm going to contradict things that I said in the past because I've been on record and I still believe it, that if I'm pulling my wallet out and putting money on the line, it's never going to be against Patrick Mahomes in the postseason. I don't care if he's throwing to players from UNLV and not the Chiefs. I'm not going to do it, but this is the most mortal the Chiefs have looked in the Patrick Mahomes era. And the way that they played him close, and we'll see how it finishes at the end of the season, I think they could take him. Cinema, for me, would be a 3-6 playoff matchup between the Steelers and the Broncos.
I think you can get it in the second round. In the
postseason. And one of my other overreaction Tuesdays that I've been waiting to reveal again to you is that on January 29th, I believe, when the conference championship games are taking place and the 2 AFC teams are ready to line up, I'm not going to be stunned at all if Russell Wilson's running out of one of those tunnels. I say that begrudgingly because I faded him so hard and that team so hard. And historically speaking, the Chiefs the Steelers have been a team that overperforms in the regular season, gets into the wild card, and then loses or runs up against a buzzsaw kind of situation. But I think it was my acknowledgement that Mike Tomlin was able to do what Pete Carroll and co figured out and what Sean Payton and Nathaniel Hackett could not, which is maximizing the things that Russ in his 30s at this stage of his career is still good at and completely eliminating or non-reliant on the things that he doesn't do well, because they're ignoring the middle of the field, just like Russell Wilson didn't throw in the middle of the field here in Denver. They're just finding ways to successfully scheme around it, and they're playing good defense, and they've got some better playmakers than we've got here in Denver with Freiermuth and Pickens and Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. But it's my acknowledgement that I'm throwing up my hands. I'm not doubting him anymore. So they've figured it out, and Russ is playing well.
He's playing great.
He's playing well, and the Steelers are playing well cohesively around him, and it's another testament to Mike Tomlin, who, gets all the praise in the world, deservedly so. I'm not going to be surprised. I'm not rooting for it, but I am no longer going to be stunned if we're watching Conference Championship weekend and frickin' Russell Wilson, who also has undergone a lot of
stunned.
Russell Wilson, who also has undergone a lot of mental transformation and persona transformation. No, James, he's so much more humbled.
He's the same guy.
He is so not the same.
Richie, one of the most...
James, he rolled up to training camp in a freaking zombie apocalypse Humvee wearing his own jersey.
What did he drive to Steelers training camp?
You didn't see it.
We don't know.
Point.
Because the Steelers media,
his team didn't make a big deal out of it.
The Steelers media isn't out there just trying to pick on Russell Wilson and make him look bad.
They weren't picking on him at that point. It was all excitement.
The 180 that happened in this town, right? So from the time they made the trade in March, and this is not a drill.
He's not doing let's ride after every loss.
Until they had the debacle with the countdown of the play clock. That whole offseason, every single question was, what's it like to eat breakfast next to Russell Wilson?
No, you're wrong.
It was such a kiss Russell Wilson's butt. And then as soon as it went bad, everybody started this narrative.
He was Captain Cringe.
You remember when they had to have his teammates come out and talk about his birthday party and that, no, we really do like him? Because the media here created a narrative that was totally false.
Denver has such a puppy dog media compared to other NFL cities.
It was completely off base. I won't get into why they did it. But it was completely off base, and it was shameful. It was shameful. The things they said about Russell Wilson and how he got along with his teammates and all the rest of this stuff, and people just took it and repeated it. It really was shameful. In a lot of ways, it was, and you don't see it coming out of Pittsburgh.
I'm not with you there because, like I said,
guy.
He was Captain Cringe when he was here, and he has not done any of that stuff. We're not getting sponsored tweets walking into the game with like Bose and Versace, and he's not rolling up to training camp in the freaking Walking Dead mobile.
His first year here was a mess. His second year here, which was the Sean Payton year, his first year he wanted. The difference is he was forced into being an anonymous donor that year. Overstep our bounds every once in a while. We all overstep our bounds and realize, I shouldn't do that. And he came back, and it started in the last 2 games of his first year when Rosberg had him get rid of the office. He didn't argue it, and then he realized, look, I'm not going to be a pocket passer.
I'm not even saying it as a negative thing.
I need to get back to being what I was in Seattle.
Things.
I just think he's the same exact guy he was.
He is
here
so not the same exact guy.
Sean Payton.
That's crazy.
Here's the thing, and I'm all this close to being in on Bo Nix. But
We've been hearing that for like a month.
But Sean Payton was wrong. He was wrong. He was wrong about Russell Wilson.
No, he was not
and
wrong.
it's being proven right now.
No, he was not
Russell
wrong.
Wilson, if Russell Wilson runs out of the tunnel and is introduced at Super Bowl 59 in the Superdome, will you say then that Sean Payton was wrong?
No.
He was wrong.
No, because it's about fit. It's about fit and what you can do with it.
No,
James.
it's about saying, hey, I got a guy who's got a lot of talent, and I'm not going to make it about me. I'm going to make it about the team. And Sean Payton made it all about him. He was wrong.
It's his system and his philosophy that's worked for his entire career.
Well, Mike Tomlin doesn't have a system that's worked his entire career.
He does. But the players that work for Mike Tomlin aren't the players that work for Sean Payton, and vice versa.
God.
Vice versa. Just like Sean McVay, one of the greatest offensive minds in football, couldn't make it work with Jared Goff.
He got to a Super Bowl with him.
Yeah, I know. And it was the worst Super Bowl of all time for the record. And they jettisoned him right after that. McVay gets Matthew Stafford 1 year. He gets a Super Bowl. And Jared Goff is a reborn identity in Detroit.
It is about fit. It is about fit. But Sean Payton was wrong not trying to make it work. It was he intentionally made it to where he could get rid of Russell Wilson. He was not
wrong. He was not wrong because he's winning the bet. You can say he hit on 17.
He's winning the bet.
You can say he hit on 17 and flipped to 4 and he got lucky, but he jettisoned Russell Wilson, took on intentionally the biggest dead cap hit in NFL history.
Yeah.
Drafted his guy in doing the 6th quarterback off the board in the process.
Okay.
And the nation is talking about him.
Okay.
Bo Nix is a star right now. A budding star.
Okay. And
James,
we'll see.
Is he not a budding star? They're talking about him like he is.
Listen, how's CJ Stroud doing in year 2?
Well, we don't know what Bo Nix is going to look like in year 2.
All I'm saying is
slumps are not uncommon.
Let's not say he flipped it and it's a 4. We don't know it's a 4. We don't.
He's definitely flipped a deuce.
Yeah, well,
he's got a good hand.
I still would rather have Russell Wilson, Brock Bowers, and $20 million worth of free agent wide receivers.
It would be bad because it would
and
be
I'd
bad
rather have Jim Harbaugh as their head coach. Would they be better right now with Jim Harbaugh, Russell Wilson, and Brock Bowers? Yes, of course they would.
Maybe, but Jim Harbaugh didn't want to come here.
Of course they would.
Jim Harbaugh didn't want to come here. Neither did DeMeco Ryans.
Well, they should have fired Sean Payton after the first year when
then hired who?
Jim Harbaugh.
He didn't want to come here.
He didn't. He wanted to finish the job at Michigan. Once he had finished the job at Michigan, he would have come here.
Oh my God!
If I'm Greg Penner and Sean Payton comes in and says, "Hey, I want to eat this entire Russell Wilson contract," I would have given him a banker's box and said, "Go pack up your office."
Oh my goodness. No, James. No. Yes. See, we were doing so good. I feel like we were doing well. And then it just inevitably it ends up with you saying you're not negative and then being mean.
How's that mean?
I would have given him a banker's box and said, I'm going to go hire Jim Harbaugh, who didn't want to come here.
No, he didn't want to come here because he had unfinished business at Michigan. As soon as he finished it,
he only wanted to leave Michigan because the IRS and every freaking collection agency and the NCAA were coming after him for all the backdoor crap.
I also just said there's a path.
He was running.
Here's why the Broncos
ran to LA.
Here's why the Broncos need to get the number 5 seed, and then I'll be done with this. Because then the 6 and the 7 are the Ravens and the Chargers. Those are 2 teams that can pull upsets.
Yep.
They can pull upsets. Mm-hmm. They can go into Pittsburgh and win. They can in. They can go into Kansas City and win. You could come out of the first of wildcard weekend with the Bills alive and the 3 wildcard teams alive. The Broncos are playing 2 home playoff games at that point. Assuming somebody goes in and beats Buffalo. There is a path to the Super Bowl if you get to 5. You just got to get to 5. See? So tell me how I'm negative again.
Well, this is one of those things where it's like you build a whole case and then you just kind of stuff some positive pork in at the end of the bill and you're like, see, I'm good.
The Super Bowl?
Yeah, I know, James, but just listen. You're waiting for Bo Nix to have a bad game, and then you're going to jump on him and be like, "Oh, everybody that was on the bandwagon."
No, I'm not.
Yeah,
I wanted to see him do something special. He showed me.
You know what we're barreling toward, right? You're going to have to abandon the Russell Wilson love, and you're going to have to get a Bo Nix jersey and all that stuff. Because he's going to prove it. He's going to prove it.
I'm a Broncos fan first. I'm a Russell Wilson fan second. I think Sean Payton. Here's the bottom line. I think Sean Payton did Russell Wilson dirty. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And a lot of people agree nationally. And a lot of people here just take whatever bullet points come out of Broncos Park powered by Common Spirit and just regurgitate him, right? Like he did him dirty. He did. Let's just say it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to say it. That doesn't mean I don't think 2 things can be true at the same time, to use a Zach biasm. That doesn't mean I don't think Bo Nix has been way better than I expected. It doesn't mean I don't think Sean Payton's done a great job with Bo Nix. He has. And it doesn't mean I don't think there's a path for this team to go to the Super Bowl. There is.
I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy, James. All right.
Spirit of the season.
Listen, I can see it. I can see it. Everyone watching us on social media and online can see it. The day of reckoning is coming for you, and there is going to come a time very soon where you are going to have to it's going to be like the Grinch's heart growing 3 sizes, or like the scene in Step Brothers where Brennan and his older brother Derek have to like make up and they do that awkward hug. That's going to be you and Bo Nix. You're just going to have to do that like.
I never disliked Bo Nix.
I know, but you've implied otherwise. You said it with your eyes. And you said it with some columns. So we'll see. We'll see. It's coming. We got a little bit of bye week to have some fun with some conversations like this, and they'll get rolling up again soon.
Russ plays Sunday.
He does. And we got the Avs and Nugs both in action tonight. We'll wait and see what the Buffs do. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. I love the barbs and the back and forths that we get into. And I saw it earlier out of the corner of my eye. I don't want to let it slip. We love the people chiming in the comments here. Mel threw up something from our Avs discussion that was absolutely insane. You can't trade Mikko for Shesterkin. And then she suggested later, he or she, I guess I don't know, that could go either way, that if you could tell me Mikko for Crosby or other players, and I'd totally be into that. My rebuttal that I want you to think about for tomorrow when Will Peterson is in here, because I'll bring it up again, is how does that make the problem any better? If they trade Mikko Rantanen for Sidney Crosby and you get to have the cool storyline of reuniting McKinnon and Sid, and all that, that's great. You just added, you gave away 100-point scorer for another, high profile offensive player, and you still can't stop more than 4 goals from going into the first period every game. So how does that make you better? Think on it. The rest of you would love to hear you chime in. And we'll get into it with Will Peterson again tomorrow. James, thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Give us a follow on YouTube, all of our social media channels at DenverSports.com. So much great content, video clips, articles, everything going up at DenverSports.com. So much for you to enjoy, and we'll get into it all again tomorrow.